Hello, hello, everyone. Let's get into this. Now, we've been talking about the book of Revelation, and we covered chapter 11 last week. And so in Revelation 10:6, we learned that God will start to finalize his wrath upon the world, and there will be no more delays. So it's really extremely significant that when God begins to close out the age, he will focus his attention on Israel and the temple. Now, in connection with this, it is good to recall the Old Testament prophecies. So there's 3 points that we can learn from this. Let's get into those 3 points. Well, the first point is that Israel will become the storm center of the world during the tribulation period. Now, in Zechariah 12 and 14, it reveals some of God's judgments upon Israel and her enemies. And we read that God will make Jerusalem a cup that will send all the nations reeling. Now, in Zechariah's time, drinking from a cup was a metaphor similar to the expression, take your medicine. Now, in this case, the nations opposing Jerusalem will be sent reeling when they drink the concoction from Jerusalem's cup. Now, the nations of the earth will gather against Jerusalem. And that's in Zechariah chapter 12, as I was saying to you, and that's in verse 1 through 3. And then Zechariah 14, 1 through 3, because it goes from Zechariah 12 to chapter 14. So you will want to read both of those chapters. And so she will be captured, and half of her Jews will flee into exile. Now remember, anyone who harms Israel will actually be harming themselves. And they will be reaping what they sow because they will be setting themselves against God. Now this struggle is going to be a struggle over Jerusalem and the temple, and it'll trigger the second coming and the battle of Armageddon. Now, Israel is God's weapon of battle, and he will use her to break the nations in pieces. He will use her to break the nations in pieces, okay? And so this struggle actually is already underway. Now, Israel has made Jerusalem its capital. And so the Palestinian Authority says Jerusalem will be the capital of their new Palestinian state. The Catholic Church, what do they have to do with it? Well, has asked that it be designated an international city. And so the Arab League and most of the international communities supports the Palestinian Authority. And the United States seems to switch sides from time to time. All of this is a thorn in the flesh for the United Nations, and there is a great desire to move against the Jews. Now, when they do, they will bring destruction down on themselves. Now, that's the first point. Let's get into the second point. The second point, the Jews want to rebuild the temple because the heart and soul of their religion, that is the heart and soul of their religion. They want to go back and practice their own religion in that temple. And so that's the reason why they want to have the temple rebuilt. They want it rebuilt on the same site as their two Old Testament temples, Solomon's and Herod's, right? King Herod, remember him, Herod? Now they have already prepared site preparation plans. There's architectural building plans, the cornerstones, the priestly garments, and the instruments of music. Now, the vessels and implements for animal sacrifices, the ephod, the menorah, and much more. Now, they have collected money to rebuild it and have requested permission to offer sacrifices and cleanse the Temple Mount. And some want to prefabricate the temple, disassemble it, and store it so it can be reassembled in 4 to 6 weeks once they receive permission to start construction. Now, I don't know about no reassembling, but that's what they have requested to be done, and store this stuff like maybe in a storage unit or whatnot, so that when it's time to take care of it, once it's done, they can reassemble it and start the construction. Now, there is a third. And here's the third point. The Palestinians want to keep this same site for their existing Al-Aqsa Mosque and Dome of the Rock Mosque. Now, they believe they will incur the wrath of Allah if they give it up. Now, they say moving or tearing down one or both of these religious buildings down will trigger World War III if they tear these religious buildings down, okay? Now, the Middle East conflict is really a struggle between two religions, Judaism and Islam. Now, it raises the question, whose God is God? and who worships the true God. So there is the who's God with a small g is God with a big G, and who worships the true God with a big G, right? Neither side dares to give in because the reputations of both their God with the small g and their religion are at stake. Now the Antichrist will work out a temporary peace. The tribulation temple will be rebuilt, but Jerusalem and the tribulation temple will be in the line of fire under the second coming of Jesus. And notice the above sequence of events, because since Jewish religious leaders have declared that the Messiah is the only one who can build the temple, it will probably be built after they wrongly accept the Antichrist as their Messiah. See, the Antichrist comes in a disguise, just as he came as the false prophet, the false pastor, and there were many that were, they believed him. They wrongly accepted him, and they were misled. And just like Eve, in the Bible in Genesis, she was misled, she was beguiled, she was deceived, and they're going to be deceived. And that's what the Antichrist wants, is for people to be deceived, to follow him, and to believe that he is the true and living God, which he is not. But that's what he wants people to believe. And there's going to be people that will believe. They will accept that, and they will follow him, and they will be following the untruth, okay, because they will not know. And that's why it's important to be aware and to study and to read, because God wants us to know. He doesn't want to push anything upon us, but he wants us to know and to be aware. And see, and when the Antichrist gets in the temple, he is going to defile it. So it's going to have to be rebuilt anyway, because it will be defiled by the Antichrist. And so it must be built before the tribulation period midpoint, because that's when the Antichrist will defile it. Now, so it seems clear that the temple will probably be rebuilt during the first half of the tribulation period. Now, one more point. If the Muslims could stop the Jews from rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount, they would. Thus, it seems reasonable to expect the Jews to take control of the Temple Mount, and for world leaders to designate it as an international site to be shared by everyone. Okay? So with that being said, so thank you so much for tuning in. And don't forget the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. And fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute and might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. And if you want to support the channel, the information is there. And thank you all again for tuning in. God bless you all on today. Peace out.